All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Today I have Joe Barsness with me. Joe Barsness is the co-founder at Fjorge. Thanks for coming on the show, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, always like to start the show by really kind of understanding what your origin story is as it relates to the agency. So, I'd love to hear more about kind of the start, the evolution of Fjorge, from like the early small shop to
hmm
which what I understand is like a 65 person agency today.
Correct. Yeah, I can kind of go through. I think the origin story of all of these are pretty interesting, and happy to share mine. I graduated from the University of Minnesota. Our business is located in Minneapolis. First, got super excited, got the big job at Target, which is a place that every college student wants to go into the corporate world in Minneapolis. They have a great corporate office in downtown Minneapolis, and I did that for 2 years only. I was assigned, so I was on the buying side, merchandising, and I was assigned to the infant clothing department. And as a 22-year-old coming out of college, I didn't know what a onesie was the first time I went into a multi-million-dollar buying meeting. I did not know it was for a baby. I did not know what it was. And so over those 2 years, I gained a lot of training, experience, but it just wasn't for me in the corporate culture. So immediately following that, I actually had a stint as a business owner owning a franchise business, very
Mm.
different from the agency and technology world that we're in today. At the time, the name has changed, but it's a franchise business called College Nannies and Tutors. The name sounds a little funky, but it's about matching nannies and tutoring with college students. Doing those services in brick and mortar stores, as well as kind of like the nannies would be at individuals' homes. So a bit like a staffing organization. Did that for 7 years as I was going to start my family. These two brick and mortar stores were on the other side of town. And I did not want to own a, doing well franchise, but not, taking it to the bank completely. And so I wanted out. We sold it back to the franchisor. And at that time, in my brick and mortar store, um, we had a back office and I had some extra space. And so my brother, Tim, actually had a solo office. And so this is where this transition changes. So
Mm.
Tim, my brother, started the organization of Fjorge in the most part. So as a college student, he was a freelance uh, developer and did that for a number of years after college, and then started kind of into this world of hiring people. And right about the time he was hiring his first dev and starting to get going there, was when I sold my business. So at the same time, I had to kick him out of the office because we no longer had rent. I guess you could call it something like rent controlled rent for him to use. At this time, it was the printer and the Wi-Fi. Um, and so, at the time I had to offboard from my other business and was giving 20 hours a week. And I just started helping him with some of the things that I had grown to know in terms of HR and business operations and that kind of thing. So, didn't really have a technology background. And so in 2012 is when that transition happened. And at the time, we were called Barsness Solutions. About 3 years later, probably roughly 2015, is when we did the rebrand to Fjorge. And so through the years 2012 to now, just to kind of recap quickly, is I've done a ton of different positions, but currently sitting in more of a new business role. And Tim is the CEO and founder, and so we've kind of split those duties up in that way.
That's awesome. That's quite the journey, and especially like having to steer an agency to the 65 uh, member employee mark. Um, I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper on kind of. some of the business development approaches that have gotten you to where you are today. Um, what are some of the things that have kind of been your bread and butter to this point?
Yeah, I mean, bread and butter can be a little bit hard to come up with because my take is that different things work at different times, different
Mm,
sizes, different strategies, but that doesn't mean I can't shed some light on it. So I think one of the keys is that, through our growth pattern initially, we didn't even really think about sales. It was word of mouth. It was, hey, I need somebody to do this. How much is it going to cost? And that was like, we would just say, hey, it's going to cost X. Do you want to buy or not? And if you don't, there was no follow up, there was no strategy. And probably a lot of bootstrapped agencies experience that. As we grew beyond 10, we kind of unofficially created maybe what you might call an account director role, where you're doing some selling, you're managing the client. And I think at that time, and this was me, at that time there was even um, project management. So I was doing the whole thing from meeting the client, selling it, and then managing the project as a PM as well. As we grew to about 20 people, we started to have more and more of a need for that in terms of account management. So we hired another person to help with that. And to get past that 20-person mark is really when we saw the need to do more what you might refer to as outbound and marketing to start to get those leads that are not generated through word of mouth or more work from the same client, that sort of a thing.
yeah.
Um, and so so that's really where we get into the business development world and my experience. So I don't know, David, are you familiar with the EOS and traction, the business
Oh,
operational
yeah.
process?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
for for those of you who don't, it's a small business operating model. I went to two, maybe three quarterly meetings where as we were growing rapidly, and got new positions essentially in a meeting. Going in, having one position, account director, coming out, business development lead. No business development department. It was just, hey, Joe, go figure out how to get new clients. And I really gravitated towards the sales side. I didn't even realize this, but back in when I owned my franchise, I did a lot of selling. I looked at it as consulting, not selling, but I had a lot of experience. I have a natural knack for that. It's something I really enjoy. And so, kind of starting in that business development world, we had a strategy that we came up with. So, as we were growing, our target market, as you might call us an agency, we think of ourselves
Mhm,
a little bit more like a dev shop or a tech agency or something like that. We At the
mhm,
time we did very little design, and so we worked for a lot of creative agencies. From 2012 even till now, we work for a number of creative agencies, and so we filled this gap of capacity or capability. There are certainly agencies that could build an entire enterprise marketing website or application, but um, they might be over capacity, and so they could use our team to fill the gap that way. There might be a small or medium-sized agency that knows how to do WordPress, but then they get a client that's in Drupal. And that's something that a gap that we could fill there. Or if you're an agency and you just want to design and you don't want to develop and you want to outsource all of your work, you can come to us. The strategy there was early on, we had figured out that if we sell to an agency, they have project after project after project. And it was
mhm,
perfect, as our team was very engineering focused, and not as creative focused as a lot of other agencies. It's really been a good partnership in that world. And so the strategy was a little bit of like selling these accounts and then doing good work and getting more and more and more.
hmm,
Um, so in terms of the specific strategies in terms of business development, we at Fjorge have always been a little bit more geared towards the outbound strategy than the inbound or marketing strategy. Although we do some of both and we do some sponsorships and we've tested ads and we've done a number of things, still kind of our go to has been that business development world. Um, as far as strategies, and why I say this with a grain of salt is like I feel like it's changing constantly. What's working to get those meetings, what's working to get those good conversations, what's working to close deals. And so some successful things. Think about 2015, 16. There was no AI, and so we actually had some interns come in. They'd be University of Minnesota students. They'd come in for 10 to 15 hours a week, and they would essentially pound the pavement on LinkedIn and emails of our target audience. And as a strategy, they would actually be on my personal LinkedIn or Tim's personal LinkedIn, and they would do the reaching out to the prospect. And so one of the things that came from that was consistency. Meaning, if we get busy, the last thing you're going to do is spend 10 hours sitting at your computer reaching out to cold prospects.
Mhm.
But the strategy with the intern was we could teach them how to quickly identify the right target, say the right thing, and make it personalized so it didn't just seem like a spammy email. You can do quite a bit of this with AI now.
Mhm.
And we don't have interns any longer because of AI and because that strategy hasn't worked as well recently. It's part of more of a wider strategy that we do um, to get those first meetings. Some other things that have been very successful over the years would be we find success a lot in person events. This can be anything from
Yeah.
a trade show, whether you're holding a booth, whether you're attending, you're going to get different value depending on what level you're at, or even speaking at those events. We don't do much speaking since we're engineers, but when we do, that seems to be beneficial as well. Um, the this and then the strategy in that too can be, where are you going? So let's say there's an event in Denver. Well, why not stay an extra day and hit up a bunch of people in Denver and see if you can't get 3 or 4 meetings on the follow-up day with people that may or may not be at the event? Or for a number of years, pre-COVID, I would go to Chicago about every 6 weeks. So Chicago's a 1-hour flight from Minneapolis. It does have a decent advertising community in it. And so when we had kind of run the gamut in Minneapolis, we've gotten a ton of meetings, we're doing a ton of work. Where can we go next? What we found is that saying you're going to be somewhere and you're there for a reason. Hey, I'm going to meet a client, or I've got 3 other meetings, or even in the agency world, I was able to say, I'm meeting with X agency in your building on this day. Can I stop by with some coffee or something like that? So
Yeah.
telling people that you're going to be present can be very beneficial for them to say yes. But you also have to make it feel like it's not all about them. Meaning, I'm flying to see you. They will be like, I'm not that big of a deal. Don't fly to see me. But if you saying, hey, I'm coming to see other people, or I'm doing a tour, I'm going to this event, would you have time for coffee? Um,
Yeah.
Saying that you can be somewhere in person can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Anything you want me to dive into more, David, on that?
Well, I mean, I think that's great. I think that highlights, one of the things that I've seen is that trust is kind of the currency in the agency world, relationships and trust. And I think you kind of highlighted this, but in person can really help to, I guess, build that trust at a faster rate than if you were just doing it virtually. Like there is something to be said for, prospecting, say on LinkedIn and things like that. But it can be a little bit more of a slow and steady sort of thing. But when you go and just, get some actual face time with people, it can make people realize, okay, I can read this person's body language a little bit more. I feel like I intuitively trust them a bit more because you know, I can find out if they're kind of a slimy used car salesman sort of person,
Right.
or if they're like a really kind of thoughtful, good listening, sort of consultative person, like those sorts of details.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. Whether we think we make buying decisions a lot on paper, and a lot of times we're making buying decisions on emotions and those subconscious feelings. I think I saw something recently, my numbers are going to be off, but like the conscious brain can can read up to like 150 megabytes of data in a second, but the
Mm.
unconscious mind can do thousands of megabytes of data
Oh, wow.
in a second. And it's just, I thought that was a really good perspective. I wish I could find, I might have to find that again and send it to you, David, but it was very interesting. And so people are constantly evaluating you subconsciously, whether they want to be or not. I think the other thing that, and in my staffing days, I did actually believe this to be true. It might sound a little prejudgmental, but I think I've read before that most hires, or most people who get hired, the person interviewing them will know in the first 8 seconds if they're going to hire that person or not. Think
Mm.
about, because there, that data that comes in that is not conscious has already exceeded in 8 seconds maybe that data that comes into the conscious mind. And so I'm just totally correlated that in on the fly there, but um, those things can be very important. The Over the years, another thing that I have learned is that sending meeting somebody once in a coffee shop or in their office in Chicago, sometimes that would work if they have an immediate need,
Mhm.
right? Like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm glad we met. I have this problem right now that you can solve. Well, I think in all ways, it's not always that you can solve a problem right away, but how do you stay top of mind? And it's not as simple as following up with "Hey, do you got anything for me? Hey, are you still interested? Hey."
Yeah.
My follow-up strategy has always been about simple awareness. No matter what you say to them, they're going to remember the vast majority of the time the services that you offer if you made the right impression. And so
Mhm.
it's about continuing to add value to that relationship before you dive into selling something. So examples could be, "Hey, I'm going to be in your area for an event. Where should I stay?" They they want to give you some advice. It can be as simple as that. "Who do you know that I can meet?" Hey, here is an article I found that might be of interest to you, or even a personal thing. "Hey, I we talked about your kid's soccer. I was just at a soccer game yesterday." Those sorts of follow ups, building the relationship, can be just as important as, "Hey, we have a new offering. Hey, do you have any work for me?" Those things get stale over time, and people just get that, kind of standoffish response. And so
Yeah.
following up with quality content. Another example, much like you, David, I have a podcast. And so as I'm meeting people and I'm talking to them for the first time, if I think they could be a great podcast guest and potential client, I want to have them on the show. That way I can learn what some of their pain points are. I can learn what they're good at. I can build that relationship. It creates, 10 or 12 touch points over 3 months with that prospect, and produce a good audio show. And so different things that you can do to stay on top of things, because the last thing you want to do is like go back in your notes and be like, "Oh man, I had a great meeting with that guy a year ago. What do I say to that person, or he or she?" It really is kind of trying to stay on top of it with those meaningful touches.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And I mean, I think, um, yeah, there's so much, I think, of a in our day and age, people, I think, tend to be too transactional up front, and that actually ends up making their jobs harder. Whereas if you're much more like, I'm going to make a lot of deposits into these different relationships, so that when it comes time for me to need to make a withdrawal, like there is some money in the bank with all those people, to like, use a funny analogy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it is not, it's not exactly business development related, but you think about this in terms of the next time you're looking for a job. If you have a job now and you decide not to talk to any of your contacts for 5 years, and then all of a sudden you get laid off, you're like, oh man, I wish I would have talked to that guy. So the last time I talked to him, I asked for something. And this time I'm talking to him or her and I need something from them again. And so, think about it in those terms, how awkward it would be to reach out to somebody and ask them if they can help you find a job if you haven't added any value in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
doesn't mean that you necessarily had to like found them a job or anything, but just casual conversation, keeping up, liking things on LinkedIn at the very least, just so that your name is on their radar. I think that's a good example for the non BD focused people out there.
Yeah. Well, one question I wanted to ask is, you mentioned building these relationships with, potential clients, but you also talked about, partnering with other like creative agencies, for example. When you think about business development, are those potential partners part of that kind of list of relationships that you're trying to make sure that you're maintaining? And how do you think about balancing, you know, direct, I guess, client
Yeah.
interactions with potential partner interactions?
Yeah, I mean, we are in that interesting world where we have a number of different relationships and situations that we run into here at Fjorge. So certainly, particularly early on, the vast majority of our work was through agencies, meaning essentially not necessarily white labeled. Sometimes we were, but that there was some selling to do to the agency. And then they're obviously either have sold or are going to sell to their client. And as we got more sophisticated, we were able to join more and more of those meetings as they didn't have the technical resources to make the sale or something like that. And so, um, there is that relationship number one. The second one is typically when we're working on a project, we actually meet the end client and we're working with them via the agency at the same time.
Mm,
And then we do work direct. I mean, people reach out to us. We do a great job with the projects that we are good with. We are not a branding agency. We are not a content writing, photography taking agency. We are design, development, and managed services. And so, as the agency sometimes does the design, we do the build, then a lot of times in terms of the managed services piece or the post launch on any sort of a product, whether it be a website or an application or a mobile app, uh, a lot of times we take over that relationship directly. The last thing a creative agency wants is a call on a Saturday about a DNS issue or some sort of technology issue that they aren't aware of and just have to relay that over to us. So we've
right.
created a lot of these relationships with corporations and have grown our business that way as well. Of course, with approval from the agency to do so. But if it's work that they're not interested in, and we're capable, then they're more than happy to recommend us or share or have us work with those folks directly. It has been a challenging thing from a business development standpoint in that we love working for end clients and we love working for agencies. And so what do you talk about? We've gone back and forth. We've had stints where we're like, hey, let's just go direct and try and sell that way. And then there's been times where we're all in on agencies, and trying to do both at the same time can be very challenging.
Hmm.
And so, as we've settled in, and maybe this will change, in the future again, but as of right now, kind of our go to market is all about that agency relationship, so that we can focus it, we can get our content squared away towards that target, knowing that if that's our target and we're doing well, we will get those direct clients either from inbound or from introductions from agencies, because sometimes even very technical projects, which we do, can be a direct referral from an agency where they might not be involved in the project at all. And some
Right.
of those are partners that we can refer back to at the same time, not usually at the same clip that they are doing to us, but there is a two-way street there too.
Yeah. I think that's a good spot for another question I had around um, kind of establishing partnerships. I think, in my experience, there's a lot of times when an agency is trying to do partnerships for the first time, they find somebody who they think's a good fit, and they chat, and then they both sign agreements to, like, pay the other party some money if they refer somebody to them. But both parties are still kind of like on the fence about referring business, and so they're like, well, when they refer business to me, then I'll start sending referrals that way. And since they're both waiting for the other person to make the first move, it just kind of stalls out and nothing ever happens. So what you're doing, sounds like something's working differently than maybe what other people have tried. Can you talk a little bit just about, um, I guess maybe if you have like a philosophy on
Yeah.
establishing a strong partnership?
Yeah, I mean, we have you could think of agencies as our partners, but we do set up that relationship in the beginning going, hey, like we do refer some work back to our agency partners and agency clients, whether you refer to them either way. But so they know that it's probably not going to be an equal partnership in that way, but what we do is add value to their sale or their capacity at the same time without fear of, say we're more closer even to a digital agency that does digital ad selling or something like that. They might do that work too. They're not usually hesitant to hand us off to a client. But as far as partnership goes, I totally am on the same page with what you're talking about. I've seen it happen even now, with some partners that we have in the tech space and those sorts of things. In order for it to be a a mutually beneficial relationship, the or the fit for the client that is needing the services still needs to be right. You can't force a situation saying like, I really love David and he's great and I want to send him all this work, but all I do is talk to manufacturing companies that have a problem with, I don't know, X, Y, and Z. That's not who David does his best work for. So if I refer work to David in that, I mean, this is an extreme example. Number one, you're probably not going to win it. And number two, if you do, it's probably not going to go that well. And then I've got egg on my face referring to somebody that's not, delivering. And so what I always tell people is like, yes, we do have some partnerships. Yes, there can be referral dollars in certain situations back and forth. But at the end of the day, I'm not making my referrals based on that agreement. I'm making that referral based on I believe that the person I'm sending your way is going to find you in particularly the most valuable.
Yeah.
And so when people are looking for those types of partnerships, I say, all right, like before we go through all the paperwork, unless again, I think this is different if you're at the Microsoft Apple level, but at our level, it's hey, we give this referral amount. If you want to see my contract, great. But otherwise, until the rubber hits the road, like let's just agree that we're going to continue to stay in touch and add value and try and look for referrals before we go through all the hassle of getting, red lines on agreements and those sorts of things. Because you're right. So many, not so many times, but I have seen that, oh yeah, everybody wants to refer work, but if they don't have any work to refer, then it kind of all goes up in smoke. So I
Yeah.
hope that helps. There's some perspective on it there. Um and it can be beneficial, but I don't think that it necessarily really sways a decision of where at least I'm sending somebody, whether they have a referral agreement with us or not. It's really just about finding the best fit for them for whatever the need is.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I wanted to shift gears a little bit to, another way that you can acquire uh, new clients is by having, an interesting service offering that gets people in the door. And one of the things we had talked about previously is that you have kind of a takeover service offering, that is kind of a way that you initiate new business opportunities. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is, how
Yeah.
it works?
Yeah. So I think everybody thinking about an agency particularly maybe a dev agency, is like, I have a new project. I want to build a website, an app, something like that. But that only works if they actually have the problem and are starting a project. So anytime they're managing something that they've already built, we need to open up that opportunity to us, especially since Fjorge is kind of built in a way to do this really well. We have a service called managed services. If you think about it, it's hosting and maintenance. We call it managed services. And this can be anything from a really simple WordPress site to a multi-million dollar application that, if it's down, it loses $50,000 an hour or something like that. And so there's some different levels that we're talking about here. But one of the advantages, that we have in the market is that we work in a number of different technologies and we take on some pretty unique things. Yes, we love to build our projects and maintain them, but about 50% of our clients that are on what we call our managed services plans, those projects we did not build. So they might be experiencing a problem such as, my site keeps going down, or my application, or I'm not getting the response times from my current partner. Or in some of the larger organizations, I'm a marketer, I have IT resources, but our main application that we sell to all of our customers is way more important than this like little partner portal that I have as a marketer. I need
Mhm.
somebody that's accountable to me, the marketer, or I need somebody who can make sure this thing is up, make the little adjustments, and do all of those things. And so, in our world as an agency, it's been fairly important and very successful for us to have these. They're kind of mini retainers. We do a couple of things behind the scenes, but then the majority of the time every month is used by the client saying, "Hey, I found a bug over here on the new iPhone 16. Hey, could you add, we need to add another digit to our product numbers in the database. Can you do that?" So
Mhm.
those things that they can't do in a CMS or do on their own, we kind of take over that in kind of like an ad hoc world, and we've created little plans around those. And the success has been that not a lot of companies are willing to take on work that other people built. We do
Mhm.
kind of a discovery process, onboarding, and then kind of take over from there. Um, and it's been great for our business. 35 to 40% of our revenue comes from these plans. And Clients love it. We continually get thanks and kudos on our, reviews and those things for it. And 18 of our 65 employees are fully engulfed in this kind of managed services process. And it managed services feeds new projects too, and new projects
Yeah.
feeds managed services. And so that ecosystem um, also benefits. Now, with that said, I've been here a long time and we have grown, but it hasn't always been, you know, roses and sunshine. When you aren't doing well in one of those areas or struggling in one of those areas, it can do the opposite. It can hurt both sides. Saying example would be, say you have a client for 3 years in managed services, and all of a sudden your services are not as great as they used to be. Well, when they're going to go build a new project, do you think they're going to come to you? Probably not. They're going to associate that, poor service with poor product build and vice versa. And so when it's good, it really helps. But when it's bad, it hurts both sides. And
Mhm.
so it can be a win-win or a lose-lose in certain situations.
Yeah.
But overall, it's a service that people really come to us for. When we get those opportunities, we win quite a bit of them, and it's something that we're really good at and our clients love.
Yeah, I think that sounds like, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. It lowers the threshold, of risk probably from their standpoint to like, okay, well, we're not asking them to build something that's tens of thousands of dollars. We're just signing up for something small, and then but they're getting to know you, and
Mhm.
then when something does come along that is one of those bigger projects, you can benefit from that as long as you've been taking good care of them, on the small things up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. One other thing that we always have this, and it was said a number of years ago between me and Tim, but if you want to get the big stuff, you got to do the small stuff. And it's hard because somebody comes to you with a small project and let's say you're, now that our sales teams and operations teams are, we still all sit in the same office, but you're not in the same teams. And you go, the operations team is like, this is just a little $5,000 project. Like, I don't really care how it goes. And sales is like, no, I need it to go really, really, really well because they want to do $200,000 worth of work after this. This is our trial.
Yep.
Um, as far as nobody really ideally would need to do that, but they do. Everybody buying something wants to try before they buy.
Yep.
And if that's the way in, then you still got to do really well in those small projects. And as we all know, some of those small projects take as much management as the big ones do.
Yeah.
And so there is that, balance between those two things.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like the closest thing to a demo that an agency can do, when it's a service rather than a product that people are experiencing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know we probably need to wrap up, but I'd love to kind of, I don't know, how do you think about sharing your company's experience that you've developed over the years with kind of the broader industry to kind of put your point of view and your thinking out there as an agency?
Meaning, am I willing to talk further or just, I guess I'm not following
Oh,
exactly the
sorry.
question.
No, just as far as I guess building the Fjorge brand and reputation
Yeah.
and things like that. Maybe a lot of times it's agencies will publish content, or they'll be on
Mhm.
social, things like that to help stay top of mind. Do you guys do anything like that at Fjorge?
Yeah. I mean, we're not the best marketers because of our engineering background and all of that. And we work with some great marketers, right? And so we kind of know what good looks like. We do talk a little bit about operations and sales in our social posts and those sorts of things, but more often than not, we're focused on what the pain points of our clients have been, what we're seeing in the market, and sharing some of that. Not that we're against it, it's just not the
Yeah.
angle that we've taken a ton of time. But I mean, it's a good point. I should do a little bit more of that. I like to talk a little bit about business development, but and we're getting better and better at posting and sharing and all of that. We just did a couple webinars, which is a little bit more our style. And so those things are coming out a little bit. But I mean, I'm more than happy to share. It just hasn't come out as naturally as I wish it would have.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I feel like, especially when there's like one skill set, it's like, we are really good engineers or something like that. And it's like, well, you want us to, you know, go become writers or something like that on top of it. So
Yeah.
definitely get that. Well, Joe, this has been super enlightening. Especially, I feel like I took a lot away from kind of our conversations around partnerships and relationships, really. Um, but I'd love to help, for the people who are listening in, who want to dig deeper, learn more about Fjorge. What's the best way for them to um, get in touch?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the easiest way to do it, because the name of our company is so strange, is just spell our name and you'll be able to find us all over the place. So it's F as in Frank, and then Jorge, Fjorge. It's a combination of the word fjord, which is a landscape in Norway, and then forge, or building something. And so we combine those two terms. It's a long story about how Accenture bought a company named Fjord, that we wanted to be that name. And so we made up this other word, and it's been really good because people remember us. Funny story. I know we got to wrap here, but funny story is we didn't even go look for the URL. We're like, we just made up a word with a J in the middle. There's no way fjorge.com is taken. Little did we know that there was a wonderful individual. I believe he was in Venezuela. His name is Fernando Jorge, and he had fjorge.com purchased. And he actually had a website there. We asked him right away if we could purchase it. He said, no, thanks. I just want to have it up. And he would forward us emails. We'd send him thank you notes. We'd send him gift cards, all this stuff. Finally, after 4 years, we were able to purchase the domain. So, um, fun little, we were Fjorge Digital for a while. So if you go look up Fjorge, you'll be able to find us, fjorge.com. everywhere. Again, so I think that's probably, and my podcast, I guess, if you're comfortable with me promoting that, it's
Yeah,
called
yeah.
Mind Your Own Marketing Business. You can find that on Spotify and all the other channels as well.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights and telling us a little bit more about Fjorge. And yeah, looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah,
Thanks again.
absolutely. It's been great. Thanks for having me, David.
Thanks.